And the United States remains fully committed to Japanese.
And starting this broadcast with live visuals of US President Joe Biden, who is holding bilaterals with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The agenda for the bilateral is a multinational trade initiative as part of Biden's push for US strategic power across Asia. The two leaders are also expected to unveil the long-awaited trade initiative, which is meant to cement the American presence in the Pacific. It has been named the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, also known as the IPEF. Washington has touted the IPEF as a framework for what will ultimately become a tight-knit group of trading nations. It will focus on setting standards in 4 main areas for the trading partner: digital economy, supply chains, clean energy, infrastructure, and anti-corruption measures. However, there is no clarity on how many countries are signing up, and questions over how the agreed standards will be enforced. During the key visit, US President Joe Biden will also be attending the second in-person Quad Summit with Prime Ministers of Australia, India and Japan, reinforcing the theme of American leadership in the Asia Pacific. And just minutes before the bilaterals, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida welcomed United States President Joe Biden to the Asuka Palace. The United States President Joe Biden is in Japan for the second leg of his Asia visit.
And of course, for hosting the Quad Summit tomorrow. Two great democracies in the Indo-Pacific are always looking for ways to do more together to bring us closer. And I'm looking forward to taking and talking to you more about these issues in the matters of the days ahead, but well beyond that time. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
さらにこのように私と私のチームおよびこのクワッドの主催などをこのように開催していただき、本当にありがとうございます。我々2国素晴らしい、民主主義国家でありますけれども、インド太平洋において必ずこの先何かできないことがないのかということを模索しておりまして。
These are live visuals of US President Joe Biden holding bilaterals with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The two leaders will unveil the long-awaited trade initiative, which is meant to cement the American presence in the Pacific. It has been named the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, or the IPEF. Washington has touted the IPEF as a framework for what will ultimately become a tight-knit group of trading nations. It will focus on setting standards in 4 main areas, that is, for the trading partner, digital economy, supply chains, clean energy and infrastructure, and also on anti-corruption measures. It is also a bid to counter China's aggression in the Indo-Pacific. However, there is no clarity as of now as to how many countries are signing up, and questions over how the agreed standards will be enforced. During the key visit, US President Joe Biden will also be attending the second in-person Quad Summit with Prime Ministers of Australia, India and Japan. US President Joe Biden will also be holding separate bilaterals with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi tomorrow. Visuals on your screen right now is of US President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who are holding bilaterals just minutes before Japanese Prime Minister received US President Joe Biden. The two leaders are also expected to unveil the long-awaited trade initiative, which is meant to cement the American presence in the Pacific. It has been named the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, or the IPEF. Washington has touted that the IPEF as a framework for what will ultimately become a tight-knit group of trading nations. Now, the focus will be on four main areas. That is, first, digital economy, supply chains, clean energy, infrastructure and anti-corruption measures. However, there is as of now no clarity on how many countries will be signing up and questions over how the agreed standards will be enforced. Now, during the key visit, US President Joe Biden will also be attending the second in-person Quad Summit with Prime Ministers of Australia, India and Japan, reinforcing the theme of American leadership in the Asia Pacific. Now, Tokyo is hosting one of the most important foreign policy summits of the year in the Indo-Pacific region. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Japan for the quadrilateral security dialogue. Ahead of the Quad Summit on Tuesday, the Indian Prime Minister arrived at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, where he was received by the Indian diaspora. On arrival, the Prime Minister also interacted with the community, where not just Indians, but the Japanese also gathered to welcome the Indian leader.
Wow.
May I have your signature? May I have your signature, please?
तो कहाँ से सीख लिया तुमने हिंदी? हैं?
Yes, I learned.
हैं? बहुत अच्छा जानते हो?
Will be meeting with the Japanese business leaders today. The Make in India is high on And for more on this, let's go across to WION's managing editor, Palki Sharma Upadhyay, who is in Tokyo to get us on-ground updates from the summit. Welcome to the broadcast. Now, US President Joe Biden is holding a bilateral with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. He will be launching the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework today. What more can we expect from the meeting?
Well, this is a very, very significant visit. I have a copy of the Japan Times with me, this morning's newspaper. This is one of the biggest dailies in Japan. And this is the top headline. It says, Ukraine looms over Biden's visit to Japan, and it then goes on to give details of what can be expected from Joe Biden's meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister. They are expected to come out with a joint statement highlighting the need for security and stability in Taiwan. So that's a direct sort of message to China. The current Japanese government under Prime Minister Kishida is also working to increase their defense budget to 2% of their GDP, which will bring Japan on par with other NATO members. So they are looking at bolstering their defense. And we expect statements on this. Kishida will also brief Biden, I understand, on acquiring counter capability. That's something else that his party has pushed for. So China is going to be central to their meeting, and of course what happened in Ukraine raises the possibility of Chinese misadventurism in this region as well, and Japan will be in the line of fire, and that is what has the Japanese government worried, and they will discuss this with their top defense and business ally, the US President.
Right. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will also be meeting with Japanese business leaders today. How significant do you think this meeting will be, considering that Make in India is high on Prime Minister Modi's agenda?
Oh, very significant. In fact, I have that same newspaper, and inside, when you look inside, you have 2 full pages that talk about the Indian Prime Minister's visit, and this is one write-up by somebody in the business community, and there are ads by Indian businessmen, and then this is a write-up by the Indian ambassador to Japan. Prime Minister Modi himself has also penned an op-ed in a Japanese newspaper. So this is a very important visit as far as New Delhi is concerned, and this is Prime Minister Modi's 5th visit to Japan in the last 8 years, which only underlines the significance that New Delhi attaches to its relationship with Japan. He's meeting business leaders. Remember, in the month of March, the Japanese Prime Minister was in New Delhi, and this year also marks 70 years of India-Japan bilateral ties, diplomatic ties. and they're talking about business, which remains the bedrock of this relationship. Japanese investments in India is something that that this government has been trying to pull. So this meeting with business leaders of various descriptions that have been lined up today assume a lot of significance before he goes on to attend a community event later this evening.
And lastly, how can Quad as a grouping create better alternatives to deal with China's growing expansionism in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, that's a question that the Quad itself has been grappling with. While they understand the challenges posed by an expansionist China and a China that practices checkbook diplomacy, the Quad has not been able so far to provide viable alternatives to countries that despite knowing all the dangers involved, fall into China's debt trap, and that is going to be the challenge for the Quad leaders. The other thing is to try and secure the Quad's security goals, strategic goals. All of the countries, all of the member countries understand the threat posed by China, yet they have been reluctant to spell out the Chinese threat, and they insist that this is not an anti-China grouping. Can they put their money where their mouth is remains the question. In the last 2 years, they've had 4 meetings, which shows that there's certainly intent. But how much of that can translate into action, we shall know by the end of tomorrow.
Thank you for getting us up to speed on this. That was WION's managing editor, Palki Sharma Upadhyay, live from Tokyo.